This video is going to be a long-term review of the Canon R6 Mark I. We've used this camera since it originally came out a couple years ago. And I can say, just to get straight to the point, it's an incredible camera, and even if you just get the Mark I instead of the Mark II, because I do have the Mark II out, that adds a couple of features that I'll mention later in this video. But even if you just get the Mark I have no complaints about this camera. It's been phenomenal. It's been really, really solid for the most part. There's been a couple of scenarios where it didn't perform as well as something like my Sony. But for the price, it's an incredible camera, and for what we use it for, I think it's the best bang for your buck, really. So, like I mentioned before, we've been using this camera as a workhorse for our business ever since it came out. And what we primarily use it for is photo. We do use this for video as like a safety angle on the very back, but our main cameras that we use are going to be Sony cameras for video. But as a backup, we shoot in C-Log, and it kind of matches with a couple of tweaks. There's a couple of tweaks. It matches well with our Sony camera, believe it or not. Like I did mention before, this camera is mostly a photo camera, and you might be asking, well, if you use this for photo, why don't you just get the R5? And the biggest reason was the price difference. The R5 is way more. It's like it's over $1,000 more, and you don't really get, in my opinion, for what we do, we didn't really need all of that. We would rather have two R6s over one R5, just simply because the way that we work. Savannah, my wife, is normally on a wedding day or on a shoot. She'll be the main lead photographer, and then most of the time I'm the main lead video. And a lot of times we're just working by ourselves, meaning that Savannah will have a Canon R6 like this, and she has a 28-70. And then I'll have the Sony a7S III as the main angle, and I'll have this second camera, or Canon R6, with a 70-200 on the back for a safety angle. And if, like I said, if we got the R5, then we wouldn't have been able to get two cameras, and we would have, we need three cameras, and that's really why. And not to mention, it takes an incredible image. I think it's like a 20-something megapixel sensor. I know the R5 has like a 48 megapixel, but you don't always need all of those megapixels for every shoot. Obviously, having like the nicest would be great, but yeah, for what we do, this is totally adequate. And the fact that we were able to get two, we have a backup just in case this one has to be sent off to Canon for repairs, which we've had to do one time, or even just to get the sensor cleaned. If we have to send it off to Canon, that can be like a week plus that we just can't be down a camera. A couple of features that are different from the Mark I to the Mark II, which is the one that we don't have. The Mark II does shoot in 10-bit for video, which is the big thing for me. This guy only shoots in 8-bit, which is one of the reasons we switched over to like a Sony a7S III. It was just the ability to use, if going from 8-bit to 10-bit, it is a lot, there's a bigger difference than you would think. You just have more flexibility with the colors and more flexibility with the footage. You can push it a lot further. With the Canon, we kind of have to get it right in camera and then make slight adjustments. You don't have as much flexibility like you do with 10-bit. As far as the megapixels go for the R6 Mark II, I believe the megapixels are slightly, there's a couple more, if not the same. Like it was like so close that I didn't even really think about, I didn't really pay attention to the megapixel jump, if there was any at all. With this, you do get dual card slots, and you get the classic Sony batteries that everybody has just about a million of. You do get the ones with the sticker. They're supposed to be better for battery, which, I mean, I've noticed the sticker versus the non-stickered. These guys typically last a lot less than these guys, especially for photo. Most of the time I can get away with two of these for an entire wedding day. With the R6, with these, you're looking at like maybe three. But they're both great. They both work, and it's nice that they stuck with the same kind of battery because everybody has about 1 million of them. You do get the flip out screen, which is really, really helpful. I prefer that most of, if not all of my cameras have a flip out screen that swivels, especially for wanting to get like low shots, even for photo and stuff. There's a lot of times I want to get low shots, and I can just flip this out and get all the low shots that I want. It just gives you more flexibility. With this, you also have the sensor door, which is nice. Sony just updated that in a software update, but for the longest time, if you took this lens cap off and the camera was off, the sensor would be wide open. And yeah, like I said, this is just a really, really good camera, and honestly, for the price, I think if you're on a budget and you really want a really, really solid camera, this guy is definitely worth looking into. Even if you can't afford the Mark II, the Mark I is still, in my opinion, just as much of a professional camera as any other camera in like this kind of price range. Now, I did mention at the beginning of the video, there were a couple of situations where this camera did fail on us, and it's going to be, honestly, it's mostly just going to be heat and humidity. We've shot a couple of weddings in the Bahamas, and this camera did shut off after a little bit, both photo and video. And coming from like a Sony a7S III, where it's just a rock solid camera and it's never given me any issues, it was mostly just like my issues or another like cheaper piece of gear like an SD card failing, not the camera itself. Coming from that world back to this, it does get kind of annoying, and there is like all it takes is one time for your camera to fail for you to like for it to always be in the back of your mind, like the reliability, like your confidence in the reliability just takes a hit, and that's always in the back of your mind. Even if you fail, it fails one time. But I mean, like I said before, that was just an extreme condition like the Bahamas, 90 degrees with like crazy humidity. Under normal circumstances, this camera works great. And honestly, when it did fail, we were shooting photos, so all I simply did was I just turned the camera off and opened this up, and after about like a couple of minutes, it was totally fine. I did shoot like this the rest of the day to let the heat kind of dissipate, but it didn't give me any issues after the fact or after that initial shut off. But yeah, if you're interested in a professional quality camera for pretty cheap, I would recommend looking into the Canon R6. It does everything. Well, it does do photo better than video, I think. I think for video, you honestly might be better off getting like a Sony. I still think that Sony still just looks better and performs better and is more reliable for video. But for photo, this is, especially if you have like Canon lenses already, like we had 1 million Canon lenses, which is why we went ahead and went with the R6 originally. It's great. Like, you can't go wrong with Canon. Canon's just as much of a professional user interface, and it gives a professional product. Just like Sony, you just have to know the limitations for video. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'll put a link down below if you want to check out this camera, if I can find it on Amazon, which I'm pretty sure I can. And if you want me to do any other long-term reviews, I'm doing these once a week on this channel. If you want to see any specific gear like lenses, tripods, microphones, whatever, let me know, and I will put it on the list to review. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.